I've never been one for superstition, but the moment our plane touched down in Hollow Creek, something in the air felt off. It wasn't just the bitter cold. Alaska's northern reaches are always cruel this time of year. But something heavier, something I couldn't quite place. I glanced out the small porthole window and saw nothing but a desolate stretch of snow, broken only by the occasional pine or the distant silhouette of a mountain ridge. This was no place for a human to live, yet here we were. 5 men and women from a survey crew sent to assess the old mining town and resupply the remaining structures for a planned restoration. At least, that's what the project manager told us. Hollow Creek was to be revitalized for something called the Alaska Heritage Program, but if you asked anyone who'd actually worked here, they'd tell you the town was better left in history. I was on the team with Greg, the seasoned engineer, Tanya, the bright zone project leader who'd taken on the job like it was some kind of personal mission. And then there was Carlos, the quiet one, always lurking at the back, carrying more weight than he let on. I guess that's how we all were. Here for different reasons, none of us entirely certain what we'd find. The plane, a small 2-seater prop, dropped us off on the makeshift runway. Really just a strip of snow that barely stood above the freezing temperature and flew off into the low clouds, leaving us alone with the silence. That's when I felt it. The quiet. The air had a weight to it, like everything was holding its breath. The only sounds were the crackling of our boots in the deep snow, the crunch of our equipment sleds dragging behind us. No wind, no birds. The sky, a sickly gray, stretched out forever above us. "Should be just a few miles up this road," Tanya said, her voice breaking the eerie stillness. Her breath puffed in the cold, and she glanced down at her map. "Just the main street up ahead. We'll make camp there." Nodded, even though the idea of camping in a ghost town seemed wrong. Hollow Creek hadn't been inhabited for almost 40 years. They'd told us it had shut down in '87, but it felt like it hadn't seen any human activity for even longer. The empty streets, the abandoned homes, they all stood there like monuments to a forgotten era. The first thing we noticed when we reached the edge of town was how everything was frozen in time. The buildings weren't just empty, they were preserved, as if someone had intentionally left them behind. Signs for a general store, the old post office, and the mining company all looked untouched by time. Even the old gas pumps were still standing, covered in a thick layer of frost. No signs of decay, no crumbling wood or rusted metal. It was as if the town was frozen, suspended in a moment of stillness. As we moved deeper into town, the first house we came to caught my attention. Its door was slightly ajar, creaking in the windless air. The faint smell of smoke wafted out as we drew closer, odd for a town that had been abandoned for decades. I glanced at Greg, who had the same look of confusion on his face. "Check it out?" he asked. "Why not?" I replied, already stepping forward. Tanya shot me a look but didn't object. I pushed open the door. The house was simple, but what struck me immediately was the warmth. The place was cold outside, but inside it was strangely warm, almost as if the fire in the stove had been burning just hours ago. The floorboards creaked beneath our feet as we stepped through the front room, but everything was in its place. The furniture was covered with white sheets, but the smell, the faintest hint of burning wood still hung in the air. And then I saw it. A table in the corner, a bowl of half-eaten stew. The steam rising from it was faint but real, almost as if someone had just walked away from it. I stepped closer, but before I could touch the bowl, something caught my eye. A symbol carved into the wall, just beneath the window. It was crude, almost childlike but unmistakable. A series of concentric circles with strange jagged lines extending from them. It didn't make sense. "Hey guys," I said, stepping back from the table. "There's something weird going on here. This place doesn't feel abandoned." Tanya entered behind me and saw the symbols. She didn't say anything at first, but her brow furrowed. "I've read about towns like this before, places left in a hurry. Maybe they just left in a rush. A few old miners or locals could have been here last week for all we know, but we did not know they are still here or not. Audrey did not inform anything, but I didn't believe her. No, this wasn't just an old town left behind. There was something about the air, the warmth, the lingering scent of smoke that didn't fit. This was something else. We left the house and continued our trek through the town. With each step, I noticed more signs of recent activity. Footprints in the snow that didn't match any of our boots. Strange flickers of light that seemed to move across the windows of the buildings. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, but the unease was building. My skin was crawling. When we reached the Firewatch Tower, the unease turned into dread. The tower stood tall, overlooking the entire town. Its windows were covered with frost, the old metal railings slick with ice. But there, in the corner, was the radio. An old, worn-out receiver that had clearly been used recently. The wires were frayed, the dials turned, as if someone had been fiddling with it not long ago. We crowded around the radio, and that's when I heard it, a faint, crackling static. I leaned in closer, fingers brushing the dials. I tried adjusting the knobs, but the static remained, growing louder, more resonant. It wasn't just random noise. It felt purposeful, like something was trying to communicate. "I've never heard anything like this before," Greg said, his voice strained. He sounded unnerved. "This static, it's not like regular radio interference, it's different." "I agree," Tanya said, her expression tense. "It's almost alive." I reached for the microphone, but before I could press it, the static grew louder. Something else followed, a faint whisper. It was too quiet to understand, but it sent a chill down my spine. Like a soft voice, carried on the wind, calling out, almost like my name. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my heart pounding. The others nodded. They had heard it too. But there was no one else here, not in this town. I stepped back from the radio, the hairs on my neck standing on end. Something wasn't right. And deep down, I knew it wasn't just the radio. Whatever was here, it was watching us. That night, the wind picked up. I had assumed the quiet, eerie calm of Hollow Creek was the norm, but as soon as the sun dipped below the horizon, the town seemed to come alive in a way I couldn't quite explain. Not with sound, but with a kind of presence. A subtle, almost imperceptible shift in the air. Like someone was standing just beyond your sight, watching you. The cold didn't feel like cold anymore. It felt like something was penetrating it, creeping under my skin. We set up camp in the Firewatch Tower. It was the safest place, and it had a better view of the town. The floor was covered with grime and old stains, but it offered us a vantage point, and that's what we needed. Tanya took the first watch, her eyes sharp, scanning the surrounding woods. Greg and Carlos went to bed early, though none of us slept well. I lay on the thin mat, my mind racing. The static from the radio still echoed in my thoughts. It wasn't the sound that troubled me. No, it was the fact that it felt alive, almost like it was breathing, shifting in and out like a pulse. When I couldn't take the restlessness any longer, I decided to step outside for a breath of air. I don't know what made me do it, but I felt the need to move, to break the stillness. As soon as I left the cabin, the cold hit me like a wall. But there was something else, something strange about the way the frost clung to the trees. The snow, so pure when we first arrived, now seemed dirty, stained with shadows. It was as though the landscape itself was bleeding away into something darker. I walked towards the edge of the town, barely noticing the crunch of my boots against the snow. In the distance, the old church loomed. Its tall steeple pointed like a broken finger. The windows were dark, as though no light had ever touched them. The building was a remnant of the town's past, but it felt off. The longer I stared at it, the more I felt like it was pulling me in. And then I heard it again. A whisper. It was faint at first, almost drowned out by the wind. But there it was, clearer this time. And it was calling my name. My pulse quickened. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice thin and fragile in the cold. Nothing, just the wind. I swallowed hard, looking around, but I could see no one. Yet the whisper persisted, drifting through the snow like it was coming from inside my head. It was distant, too far to make out, but it wasn't in my ears. It was in my bones. It made my body hum, like I was resonating with the very air around me. Then I saw it. Movement. A shadow darted between the trees, just outside the perimeter of the town. At first, I thought it was an animal, a bear, maybe, but the way it moved didn't make sense. It didn't follow any natural pattern. It was too smooth, too deliberate, like it was watching me, waiting for me to react. I froze, my breath shallow, my heart hammering against my chest. Then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the shadow was gone. I turned to head back towards the tower, but something made me glance back, and when I did, I saw it. A figure standing in the doorway of the church. It was tall, too tall. It didn't move, just stood there, its form obscured by the swirling snow. I couldn't see its face, but I knew it was watching me. I ran. I didn't look back, and I didn't stop until I was safely inside the tower again. My hands were shaking as I gripped the doorframe, gasping for breath. I looked to Tanya, who was sitting up now, watching me with a quiet, knowing expression. "You saw it too," she said softly. I didn't need to ask how she knew. The look in her eyes told me everything. "Is it the town?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Tanya didn't answer right away. She looked out through the narrow window at the faint outline of the church in the distance. "I think it's the land," she finally said. "It's not the town that's haunted, it's something beneath it." I turned back to her, frowning. "Beneath it?" Tanya nodded, as if she were piecing something together that hadn't fully formed. "I've been reading about the area. Hollow Creek wasn't just a mining town. Before the miners came, there were other people here, people who vanished. Locals say there's something under the ground, something ancient, some kind of energy, something that calls to you." Her words hung in the air like a heavy fog. She didn't have to say it aloud, but I could feel it. The land itself was alive. "We should leave," I said, my voice shaking despite myself. Carlos, who had been awake, spoke up from the corner. His face was pale, eyes wide. "I don't think we can. I've been checking the radio. It's still picking up something, a signal." Tanya's face paled. "A signal?" Carlos nodded. "Not static anymore. A rhythm. It's not normal. Not like anything I've heard before." I stepped closer, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. "What do you mean, rhythm?" "I don't know," Carlos said, his voice trembling. "But it sounds alive, like a heartbeat, and it's growing stronger." The air grew heavier, pressing down on us, making it hard to breathe. The walls of the tower seemed to close in. I knew then that it wasn't just the town. It wasn't just the strange whispers or the shadow in the trees. Something was waking up, something beneath Hollow Creek, and I didn't know if we'd make it out before it found us. The next day, the world outside felt unnaturally still, like the entire landscape was holding its breath. The snow-covered trees stood like frozen sentinels, their limbs stiff, and the wind had died down to a ghostly murmur. The eerie silence was broken only by the faint crackling of the radio, which Carlos had left on. The rhythmic pulse that had begun the night before was louder now, more insistent. I couldn't help but feel like it was calling us, like it was waiting for something. It was a quiet, terrifying hum that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards of the tower. I wasn't sure if it was in my head or if it was real, but I could feel it in my chest, under my ribs, like my own heartbeat was syncing with the pulse. I tried to distract myself by checking the supplies we'd brought, though it felt pointless. I wasn't sure how long we could last here. The idea of leaving crossed my mind, but something about the town, and especially the radio, made it feel like we were trapped, like leaving wasn't an option. Tanya was the first to break the silence. "Have you noticed anything strange in the air?" she asked, her voice low and tense. I turned to her, frowning. "What do you mean?" She stood by the window, staring out at the church in the distance. Her eyes were wide, pupils dilated. "It's like the air is thickening, almost like I'm breathing something other than air." I stepped over to the window, but I didn't see anything unusual. The town was still, the church still looming in the distance, its steeple piercing the gray sky like a needle. Carlos joined us, his face pale. "I've been hearing things. Not just the radio, whispers in the air." Tanya nodded. "I've been hearing them too, and I swear, when I look at the church, it's like the shadows around it are moving. Just a little, but it's enough." I looked at the radio, now crackling louder than before, the strange pulse continuing to grow stronger, more intense. It felt like it was pushing against us, like it was trying to make us understand something, or force us to listen. "Let me try something," Carlos said, moving over to the radio. He adjusted the knobs, turning the dial in search of a clearer signal, though the static only seemed to deepen with every turn. Then the pulse shifted. It wasn't the same rhythmic hum we'd been hearing. It changed. Now it was faster, almost like a rapid tapping, like a heartbeat speeding up, growing frantic. I felt a jolt in my chest, as if the sound was resonating in my very bones. I backed away from the radio, suddenly too aware of the suffocating stillness of the cabin. My head swam, and I felt dizzy. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. Tanya stepped closer to Carlos. "Do you hear it? The change?" Carlos nodded, his face drawn. It's like it's becoming aware of us, like it's reacting." I turned away from them, my eyes darting to the windows. The snow outside was no longer untouched. There were footprints in the snow, leading toward the church. Long, uneven strides that looked unnatural, as if whoever or whatever had made them wasn't human. "Are those ours? Footprints?" I asked, my voice shaking. Tanya squinted, her breath fogging the window. "No, those are new." We were silent for a moment, the weight of the moment settling in. The radio's pulse continued to rise, quicker, more erratic. Then, the doors slammed open. Carlos jumped back, his eyes wide, but there was nothing there, just the empty cold air rushing in. We stared at the doorway for a long moment, unsure whether to step outside or to lock ourselves in and ignore whatever that presence was. Tanya slowly reached for the door handle, her movements hesitant. "We need to know what's out there. If we stay here, it'll just keep getting worse." I didn't argue. I didn't want to stay. I wanted to leave, but I knew it wasn't that simple. The church called to us. The town pulled at us, even if we couldn't explain why. And that damn pulse on the radio? It felt like it was a part of us now, like we were becoming tethered to it. We stepped outside, our breath clouding in the air, and made our way toward the church. With each step, the shadows grew longer, twisting unnaturally as though they were alive and watching us. The footprints ahead led directly to the church doors, where they stopped as if the person, or thing, had disappeared into thin air. But something was different now. The air had thickened even more, and I could feel it pressing against my chest, as if the very atmosphere were alive. My skin tingled with the sensation of being watched, of being sized up by something ancient, something incomprehensible. The doors of the church creaked open, though no one had touched them. I felt a chill run down my spine, but there was no going back now. We had to go in. We had to see what was waiting for us. As we stepped inside, the first thing that hit me was the smell. It wasn't the musty, decayed scent I expected. No, this was something worse. It smelled old, but not in a natural way, like a centuries-old mildew, but with something almost sweet beneath it. The walls of the church were covered in symbols, markings I didn't recognize, all carved deep into the wood. The floor was slick, covered in a black ichor that glistened as if it had just been spilled. At the altar, there was something or someone sitting. It was a figure, hunched over, its features obscured by a hood, but I could tell it wasn't human. The air seemed to pulse around it, just like the radio, just like the heartbeat we felt earlier. The figure stirred, slowly turning toward us, and when it did, its eyes glowed with a soft, ethereal light. A pulse hum was coming from it. The moment the air shifted, I felt it deep in my chest. A low vibration, like something massive shifting beneath the earth, unseen but felt. I looked up to see Tanya staring at the far corner of the cabin, her face pale and wide-eyed. Her lips trembled as she pointed. "Did you see that?" My heart pounded in my chest. This was real. We were not alone. The figure didn't speak, didn't move, but I could feel its eyes on me, its presence pressing in from all sides, suffocating. It wasn't just the figure. It was the sensation of being watched, of being trapped. "Guys," Carlos whispered hoarsely, backing toward the door. "We need to leave, now." 8. I opened my mouth to agree, but before I could say a word, another shape materialized from the far side of the room, emerging out of the darkness like smoke. This one was smaller, crouched low, but its eyes gleamed with an unnatural intensity. It had an angular, twisted body, its limbs elongated in ways that didn't make sense. It hissed as it moved, its sharp, skeletal fingers scraping against the floor, drawing lines in the dust. My skin crawled. The air in the cabin felt thick, as though it was closing in on us, suffocating us. "Turn around," Tanya whispered, her voice shaking. I turned just as a third figure appeared from the shadows. This one was more human-like, but its features were wrong. Its face was smooth and featureless, like a blank canvas. But there was something behind its eyes, something that pulsed with power. It had no need for movement. Its presence alone made the walls feel as if they were bending toward it, warping in an unseen pressure. I couldn't breathe. My legs shook beneath me and my mind raced, trying to find a way out, a way to escape, but the figures were everywhere now. They were coming from every corner, from cracks in the walls, from the rafters above, emerging as though they had always been there, watching us, waiting for us. I turned toward the door, but it was no use. The wooden frame had warped and the exit had vanished. It wasn't even a door anymore. The walls pressed in on us, and the very air seemed to pulse with a rhythm that was not ours. We were trapped. Carlos stumbled, his back hitting the wall as he turned in a panic. No, this can't be happening. The figures began to move toward us now, slow at first, but with an increasing sense of inevitability. There were so many, more than I could count, each one coming from a different corner, a different shadow. Some crawled, others walked upright, but none of them made a sound as they moved, as though they were part of the cabin itself. I could see the fear in their eyes, the fear in my own reflection in the broken glass of the window. The shadows around us began to stretch, their forms becoming impossibly tall, their features elongating into grotesque shapes. I couldn't understand what I was seeing. My mind couldn't process it. It felt like I was no longer me. I was a part of something else, something much larger than myself. Tanya backed up, tripping over an old chair. They're not just coming for us. They've always been here. They've always been here. Carlos's voice cracked as he looked at the figures closing in. This is not real. This can't be real. But the cold, suffocating reality hit like a physical blow. This was real. We weren't imagining it. These things, they were here, and we had no way out. The first figure stepped forward, its hands outstretched, fingers curling like tendrils, the tips elongating as it moved toward us. It moved with disturbing grace, like it knew exactly how to torment us, how to make us feel powerless, helpless, like prey. The others followed suit, some moving slowly and deliberately, others with an unnatural speed, surrounding us, closing in from every direction, blocking our escape. Tanya's scream shattered the silence. Carlos shouted something, but it was swallowed up by the suffocating quiet of the cabin. The stillness was deafening, pressing against my skull. I looked around frantically, trying to find something, anything that could help us, but the cabin, once just a shell of wood and dust, had become a cage, a silent spectator to our terror. The figures didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their presence alone told us everything we needed to know. We were theirs. My breath quickened, my chest tightening as I felt a heavy pressure in my mind, a force dragging at my thoughts. It was like the air itself was thickening, making it harder to think, to breathe. My body felt heavy, like lead, and I could barely move. I felt like I was being drained from the inside, my limbs refusing to respond. Just as the first figure reached out to touch me, its cold fingers brushing the bare skin of my arm, something shifted in the air. The space around us seemed to crack, like reality itself was splintering, and I heard the voice. Not one, but many, echoing in unison, like a chorus of distant thunder. "You disturb us," the voice rumbled, its tone deep and ancient, sending shivers that radiated through my bones. "You do not allow us peace. You take our place, our home. You trespass where you do not belong. For too long you have taken what was never yours." The darkness seemed to pulse around us, undulating like a living thing, drawing closer. The figures loomed larger, their movements slow but deliberate, like the final approach of a predator. The voice grew louder, and with each word the room seemed to close in on us. "When we take it back, when we reclaim what is ours, it will be ours forever. You cannot stay. You cannot keep coming here. You cannot take it from us again. This place was ours before you, and it will be ours again. You have no right to walk on it, to exist here." A cold so deep and so penetrating I couldn't comprehend it surged through me, biting at my skin, tearing at my insides. The words were like hooks, each one sinking deeper, twisting in my chest. "We have waited. We have watched. And now you will leave us to our peace. You will be the ones to leave. Or we will take what is ours." The final words reverberated in the air, the chill in their tone so absolute it felt like the room itself was suffocating, like even the light had been swallowed whole. The figures closed in faster now, surrounding us completely, their hollow eyes staring into ours, their mouths never moving, but their words filling our heads. I could feel the ground beneath me tremble, an earthquake of immense force building beneath the cabin's foundation, shaking my very core. The darkness around us deepened, thickening, until it was more than just a lack of light. It was alive, pressing against us like it was trying to swallow us whole. And then, just as I thought I might lose my mind to the overwhelming presence of these things, the darkness split open, a crack in the fabric of reality. And in that crack, I saw it. A void, endless, blacker than any night I had ever known. An emptiness that seemed to stretch on forever, beckoning, pulling us toward it. It was more than just a void. It was the nothingness between stars, the space between worlds, a place we should never, ever be. The figures didn't touch us. They didn't need to. Their eyes, their presence were enough. The pull of the void was stronger now, and I could feel myself being dragged toward it, my body weakening, my thoughts unspooling like thread. And then, as the last vestige of light flickered and died, I heard it. The final words whispered into my mind, like a promise from the abyss. "Allow us to live. Allow us to rest. This is our place. You do not belong here." And with that, everything went dark. The silence that followed was worse than anything I had ever known. It was the silence of an empty world, the silence of the void.